Let me give the mic over to Senator Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair Sanders. Thank you, Chair Sanders. A 32-hour work week with no loss in pay. My staff has volunteered to be the test case for that. I mean, like, who wouldn't want it? It's free money, if you will. No loss in pay, but you work a lot less. But in reality, there is no free lunch. Workers would be the ones who would pay, not get paid extra. The government mandating a 32-hour work week requiring businesses to increase pay at least an extra 25% per hour would, frankly, destroy some employers. They would ship those jobs overseas, or they would automate to replace those workers for whom they have an increased expense, or they would dramatically increase prices to make the stay afloat. Now, we've talked about the Biden economics leading to inflation. This would be napalm upon the fire of inflation. If this policy is implemented, it would threaten millions of small businesses operating on a razor-thin margin because they're unable to find enough workers. Now they've got the same workers, but only for 3/4 of the time, and they have to hire more. In fact, there's even an incentive for them to dip down so they make everybody part-time, and then they don't have to pay certain penalties which are certain requirements which are required for full-time. Now, if a business wants to voluntarily try a 32-hour work week for themselves, federal law allows it. We don't have to mandate. And we will hear from a business today that does that. So if an employer thinks it's good for their business, makes them more competitive, go for it. We think that's a good thing. But by the way, I'll note that the chair has not done that with his staff. Why? Because there's a certain amount of work required for the continuity of the work. That's just basic. Now, if a business needs to maintain a 40-hour work week to remain competitive, not just locally but globally, a government-mandated 32-hour work week would be catastrophic. Government should not be in the business of undermining an employer's ability to keep their doors open with unreasonable and perhaps unconstitutional mandates. Now, the chair frequently says the United States is the wealthiest nation in the world. We are. How do we achieve it? American work ethic, second to none. And we have a balance. We don't have people, as they do in China, working 80 hours a week, but we have that balance. This disrupts that balance. And we won't maintain the status of being the world's wealthiest nation if we kneecap the American economy with something which purports to be good for the American worker, but indeed will lead to offshoring of jobs seeking for a lower-cost labor force. Now, there is a reason that no other country has a mandatory 32-hour work week. When Japan shortened its work week from 46 to 30 hours between 1988 and 1996, economic output plummeted 20%. Belgium, as the chair notes, has a 4-day work week, but those workers work 40 hours within those 4 days. Now, AI and other technologies have the potential to dramatically increase economic productivity. I think we should have a bipartisan hearing on the potential impact of AI on the American economy. If we have this, my gosh, I am ecstatic. And I see one of, Dr. Shore, you're nodding your head yes. We're simpatico on this. We need to explore it. My office published a white paper and an RFI to stakeholders last year on how this committee should approach AI and the impacts upon health, education, and labor. And we're working on next steps based upon that feedback. But a mom-and-pop restaurant is not really seeing increased productivity from AI. They're having trouble finding enough people to fill shifts, and if we require them to pay for a 40-hour work week for 32 hours of work, how will it turn out for that mom-and-pop restaurant? Hospital staffing shortages, we've talked about that. Threatening public health. Well, why are we passing a law to exacerbate that shortage? UAW pushed for a 32-hour work week. It didn't happen. But now I don't think the federal government should mandate it, frankly, just to kind of placate a Democratic political base. Frankly, this seems as an exercise to try and help the UAW lay the groundwork for future negotiations. If the UAW wishes to discuss this, they should do so at the bargaining table. Now, by the way, I apologize if this hearing gives anyone false hope, but a mandatory 32-hour work week is bad policy. I'll note not even Democrats unanimously support this. But it may give us an understanding where the Biden administration is heading. They're up for a tough re-election, and they may be more than willing to use executive authority to do something which actually has bipartisan opposition. And there's been a concerning pattern from Democrats of prioritizing policies to help politically connected unions at the expense of the workers and businesses, themselves. Recently, the Biden administration proposed a new overtime rule, dramatically increasing overtime pay threshold by 55%. That will result in layoffs, and it will result in more inflation. The Biden administration released a new joint employer rule, threatening the viability of the franchise model that employs over 9 million workers and has empowered people who had a dream of becoming a small business person to become a small business person and otherwise would not have. The Department of Labor's new independent contractor rule jeopardizes the ability of 27 million Americans to work as independent contractors, with the flexibility to pick their own hours and work for multiple businesses, and this being attractive, but their independence and protection from forced unionization has made restricting this freedom a top priority for unions. The administration's assault on workers' flexibility and employers via rulemaking is unacceptable. These policies hurt the American worker and, by the way, contribute to inflation. As I said, I would have been excited to work with the chair on a hearing to discuss the impact of AI and the new technologies in our jurisdiction. There is very strong bipartisan interest in examining this issue. But we are working instead upon a bill which will never pass Congress and will be detrimental for American workers. With that, I yield.
Thank you.